welcome to the Neo News Today podcast. I'm your host, Dylan of Neo News Today. In episode 33 of the NNT pod, I had a chance to sit down and speak with Ryan Lloyd, the founder of TranslateMe, a Neo-based instant translation service. In this episode, we got to touch on Ryan's background as a South African and an entrepreneur, as well as his entry into the blockchain space through buying ant shares and mining Ethereum. We touched upon the origins of TranslateMe, which got its start by translating restaurant menus for hotels in Mauritius, and the subsequent market Ryan saw open up afterward. It was also great to learn how users of the platform improve the algorithm each time they use TranslateMe. And we also touched upon TranslateMe's experience in surviving the 2018 and 19 crypto winter, as well as the recent downturns associated with the COVID-19 global pandemic. We concluded our chat with Ryan's favorable outlook on the Neo blockchain, community, and ecosystem. I do want to point out that there were some very minor technical issues with lag and delay a couple times throughout our conversation, so please excuse any of those blips you might notice. Other than that, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ryan as much as I enjoyed having it. Hey guys, what's going on? Dylan with the Neo News Today podcast. Today we are speaking with Ryan Lloyd of TranslateMe. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Hi, very, very good. Thanks, Dylan.
I'm personally really excited to have you on the pod. We were talking earlier that you've been around in the ecosystem for a while, but before we jump into this, I just want to ask, who are you and what's your background?
Okay. My background is I'm South African. Let's start there. Born here. And I think what's relative is that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Started my own business at 2023. That company was a development company for software, mostly web-based, and now applications. That's still ongoing. It's 13 years in, and I have a rich history in management of projects that are related to development of applications and web-based jobs in our country in South Africa. After the 13 sort of years of being involved in that, I've always been trying to look at different aspects of how to make money and other things that interest me. So I actually am involved in a company called Hearing Aid Labs. I'm the MD for the company. We provide a hearing service of fitting and prescribing hearing aids to elderly patients in the country. And that's a very successful business here in South Africa, and it's also a big part of what I've been doing for the last 5 years. And then, of course, we've got TranslateMe, which you guys all know about. And I have a few other businesses that are, I would say, interests, but they are, small money makers on the side. So I'm definitely an entrepreneur at heart because I've got more than one thing always going. And but the most important part is I enjoy it. I'm certainly not looking back on any of that. I live in South Africa, but I'm actually based in Mauritius, so I'm a citizen from South Africa, but the business is based in Mauritius, and my family and myself, we live in Mauritius. That's only been for the last couple of years, but loving it, and the island's actually poised for a lot of benefits in the future, not just for TranslateMe, but a couple of our other interests there.
Awesome.
As far as blockchain goes, sorry, I'm ranting.
That's okay.
On that side, I've got, I think things actually started in 2017 for me officially, which is not as early as I would have hoped. I wish I got in earlier. Interesting enough, one of the first tokens was ant shares for me that I actually bought. And that's probably why I've stuck with Neo, because I'm so close to that personally. And in 2017, just towards the end, we got involved in a lot of mining. So we actually built the first We're actually the first company to build an Ethereum mining rig in South Africa. We're one of the first to actually provide that as a service. That was an amazing trip because we did really well there. And as a result of being involved in mining and in the communities here in South Africa that were just sort of getting into Bitcoin, I got involved with a couple of launches, more on the development side, and marketing for the company that I represented in South Africa, but definitely on the front end lead. And one of the bigger projects that I was involved in was BlockMesh. It was a South African RCO that was launched in 2018, and I was the project manager for the launch and subsequently for the project thereafter, product development also. And that really brought a lot of experience to the table, which I've brought into TranslateMe. And I think that's where I learned a lot. And while we've done things differently, because of that and the industry, but being so close to it when they did the RCO.
Cool. So it sounds like you have a background in sort of communication and linguistics. So with your hearing company, so how long has TranslateMe itself been around?
It actually started as a service that we recognized could be really, really big in Mauritius. Mauritius is a very tourism-based country, so it has a lot of tourists coming from all over the world. And what the hotels are battling with is the translation of certain aspects of the documents, namely the menus. So when a customer would sit down and order, they would battle to order from the menu. So we launched a platform where the hotels could scan the menu using QR code and instantly translate that information. And yeah, it took off and it was really great. The islands, a lot of the hotels are using our service now, and we're expanding to other areas. But that's where TranslateMe started. And from that, I was in the middle of BlockMesh, and we were looking at how we could take the service further, and it wasn't just menus. It could be documents. It could be chat. There was so much more you could do with translation because we just started fiddling with it for this specific service. One of the bottlenecks for us is that we started realizing there were some problems with how this translation works and how much it costs and who's actually providing the service. So it really started in Mauritius because of the menu platform. But it grew out of the problems that we had just with that little business, and us starting to realize, but hang on, there's really a gap here, and that's what I saw. I saw a massive gap. And like I said, I'm involved in a few other businesses, but nothing drives me more than the potential of TranslateMe. I could never probably work on anything bigger than TranslateMe. I just think it's got such massive potential. So, yeah, that's where it started, and that's why it started, because we recognized that just with that little business that we created in Mauritius.
That's really interesting, because I think a lot of the Neo community will know TranslateMe from the MVP that you've built for Telegram, but it sounds like that the menu translation service was kind of your first, I guess you could say, dipping your toes in the water.
Absolutely. Putting everything aside, all we set out to do was translate menus for hotels. It was a little niche business that could do well in Mauritius. But when we started thinking about restaurants as, let's say, a second tier, because it's just that market's much bigger than the hotels in terms of clientele, we realized that the cost, or rather the platform and its cost for translation, was too much for smaller but actually a bigger market. And we even looked at cheaper options, and that's where we really started looking at it. And right in the beginning, our first sort of look into this problem is it possible for us to even create something that could automatically translate? And within the first 3 months of trying to look at that, we did a basic proof of concept, and we were able to quite quickly, to my surprise, because it really was a test, create an algorithm that could give you a variance of translation. And I just really said, well, how hard can this be? And how can we make it better? And why why are there so many problems with this? Why has no one really fixed these issues? And that's where I just started seeing the gaps. And I mean, the market cap and the potential, the worldwide application of this, there's just too many things to really say, right, let's really nail it down. There are so many opportunities now making souls available because of the limitation of the service. And really, there was only Google at the time when we started, Google and Microsoft. And now there's a few more that have joined the run. But there was only these two companies. And that was the first thing that shocked me, is that there were only two companies actually offering the service. And I put it down to, it's probably impossible to match what they're doing. But after 3 months of using my own resources and my company based in South Africa, because we had a couple of developers we could put straight onto it, we found that it's not rocket science. Sure, it's not simple stuff, but it's certainly not out of reach of a team of developers that want to make it happen. And that's what we've been striving for, is really improving that concept and saying we can do this.
Yeah, something that's unique about TranslateMe is you've developed your own corpus. So I'm interested to hear about how the algorithm and the corpus that you've developed really play into one another. And maybe you can also talk about the TranslateMe community that has helped contribute to the corpus as well.
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that, first of all, we are creating something that already exists. Google's got a platform, Microsoft got a platform, Amazon, DeepL, Zandex, Baidu. They're all essentially recognizing the value and have been working on this for years. But one of the things that our algorithm does is it takes into account corrections. It has an analysis procedure that the other algorithms don't have, which is that we can input data that is specifically related to the areas that it's failing. And this comes from our human contributors that are giving corrections back to us. And those corrections in the form of a couple of sentences per user, each one adjust the algorithm slightly to improve it for its next opportunity to translate a sequence of words similar to that sentence that was submitted. And that's really the major difference. Outside of that, we're using very traditional methods, latest as far as possible, testing different algorithms. There's also other layers in terms of fine-tuning your results. I mean, there's also grammar to consider. So it's not a simple task. It's multi-layered. But our biggest differentiator is the fact that users can submit this data to us, but specifically to what we're looking for. And we invert that as a positive and then output something that's even better on the next run.
Cool. So is this where kind of you integrate blockchain into the TranslateMe platform to reward users for contributing to your corpus? And what are there other considerations and ways that you implement blockchain into the TranslateMe processes? Okay,
so a lot of people ask, well, why even use blockchain? So at the sort of raw level, basic level, we need a value system that can incentivize the user for this data. If we don't have that, we're just not going to collect that data. That data's result will create a higher quality output, and that higher quality output is a revenue producing product. The cycle is more of that data creates a better quality product, which from a revenue point of view is obviously where we're going. And that cycle needs some sort of value system. A value system that says, if I'm going to get 1,000 people contribute, let's say 100,000 sentences, for example, that value has to be translated into something that works, which is the quality of the actual algorithm, and then output in a way that a consumer, which I wouldn't refer to them as a consumer, maybe a platform or a company or any entity that would want to use the translation tool would need to buy that service. But instead of circumventing the flow we're going to use TMN as a cycle, which is contributors up the quality and consumers consume the service but pay with the same TMN that was used, and that goes back into your exchanges for the contributors to convert to a value that they feel is BTC or fiat or whatever they want to convert it to. So it is strictly a utility, and there's a lot of reasons we want to keep it that way, but it certainly is needed because it's connected to the value. So the more the data that we are able to collect, the higher that value accumulates. And essentially, we have not got there yet, which is that I cannot say to you, Dylan, here, use my French model. It's okay, but it's not at a commercial level, and that's what we're striving for. But when it does, the cycle will begin. As soon as a company starts using our French model, the TMN that has been issued has a value because it's needed to consume and render the service. So at a core level, it's strictly a utility token. There's a lot of other layers that we're going to be using, I would say, not necessarily Neo, but definitely blockchain solutions that would help us apply those requirements. But at its very core, it's a utility to move the value of the contributors through to the consumers and then back to the contributors.
So TranslateMe did not conduct a public token sale, which is something that I've always respected and appreciated about the project. And it sounds like the revenue model is going to be the companies that in turn use the translation services. Now, given the fact that you did not conduct a public token sale, and we know that the revenue model is built on driving growth from larger companies, it sounds like that we're not quite there yet where that revenue is being driven. So I really want to hear about your experiences of not only surviving the crypto winter, the bear market, but then also surviving the most recent sort of like global event, the world just felt with the downturn related to COVID-19.
So first of all, the reason we've got through that is because the project's self-funded. And then secondly, the team that you see on our website are mostly contributors that believe in the project and don't draw heavily on our costs monthly. So we are very shrewd with how we spend and watching everything because we just don't have that revenue. And really the race is to get there, but and we're pushing hard on that. But there is an issue with funding. We didn't want to do an RCO for the obvious reasons that it's so associated with scam coins. And the only reason we said, let's not do an RCO straight away. Let's at least just prove concept. And personally, I wouldn't be able to take someone's money if I knew 100% sure that we were going to be able to return that money. I just consciously couldn't do that. And that's what an RCO is. An RCO is, okay, we're going to build this, but you have to bet on me, but I'm not even sure if I can do it. So, you just take a chance. And we just wouldn't want to get into that. And truthfully, we didn't need to. I would say though, if I had to go back, if someone, knowing what I know now, I would have loved to had some of the funding that a lot of these projects had, because it certainly would have fast tracked us. But I'll tell you one thing is when we do get to the point where we are able to raise funds because there's a working product, we'll be a lot stronger for it and we'll be a lot wiser in terms of our decisions. And I think that you can't put a value on that. So we're happy with that decision. And I'm glad that it's also given you a sort of positive outlook on the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So cognizant of your time, I also want to talk a little bit about Neo. So you mentioned earlier that you were an AntShares token buyer. So you've been in the Neo ecosystem for quite some time. Why did you choose to build TMN on Neo as opposed to Ethereum or any other blockchain?
So personally, it's because I've followed Neo, and with all these options that are out there, one of the biggest questions that you have to really answer is are they doing this because they're here to stay and become one of the platforms of choice in the future, or are they a platform that you're going to develop or tie yourself with and then later find out it's just projects that, first of all, always strived for compliance as a sort of guidance, and regulatory sort of a direction. So they weren't going, oh well, we're just gonna go the black sheep way, and completely, detach from what's reality, which is you've got to look at compliance, you've got to look at regulation. So that struck a chord. I also feel like Neo in the beginning, in the early days especially, it attracted less scams because of the entry contract costs, especially in the hype. You couldn't just create a coin and start this project. There was a barrier, and the barrier definitely kicked a lot of rubbish to the side. And that was another reason we said, you know what, that's just a good choice, because it's the association that you want to be clear on. When you do rise to the top, you don't want to be associated with 99% of the scam coins that were on the platform. You want to be there with other projects that are also doing well. And I just felt that Neo did well to protect itself as much as it can against that, and they've still done well to do so. So that was another factor. Technically, there are a few obvious choices, but I think the big one for us is their transaction fees. And still today, there's no transaction fees on the chain, which has helped us a lot. With our limited funding, if we had the transaction fees we had, let's say with Ethereum, it just would be harder to issue tokens like we have and wanted to in the future. And it was just a bonus not to be able to pay that. We thought by now there would be some sort of fees, but it certainly was a bonus at the time. I think over all of that, the community at sort of Neo's level, even though smaller than Ethereum, is more real to me. I feel like there's more of a reality in the people that follow Neo than there is on these other chains that exist. And I felt that personally, before I even got into this with you guys, with the members of Zion and you guys with Neo News, and wherever I went, people weren't blindly just following Neo; they passionately supported Neo, and that actually has been such a blessing for us. You guys and other parts of the Neo ecosystem, it's always been so open and welcoming, and that's just been a real bonus. And I saw that in the early days, and it's still here today with the platform.
That's awesome to hear. So I have like a million more questions I wanted to ask you, but in wrapping up, I'm wondering, what can ecosystem users look forward to with TranslateMe next? What are your next steps?
So right now we're working on validation of the sentences that we're collecting through our Telegram MVP, and we're looking at opening up the option to not just be able to submit through our app, but also on other platforms. So the nearest waypoint for that is we're building a bot that will work on any of Telegram's clients, which opens up it opens us up to the access of submitting corrections, to about 400 million users at the moment on Telegram. So that's a big step for us. The French to English model is the second biggest proof that we are not just messing around, and that is in its third version. We have 40 million sentences that are a combination of users that have submitted through our platform and resourced data that we're busy training at the moment, and we look to have that available on that API that we have live right now as a I would say a good proof of concept to show that there is quality in the work that we're doing. And once we get that right, we're going to scale that into other languages, of which we've already started. I must say that things are moving slower than what I would have hoped. With the resources that we have, the team are doing their best to contribute. And we did get hit a bit by the COVID-19 where, obviously new stresses reduce our capacity, not just myself, but in our team. But we are certainly here to stay. And the only thing that will knock us off our trajectory is an absolute failure in terms of losing ground, which is against the big guys like Google and Microsoft, and losing ground in such a way that I feel personally will never catch up. And until they implement something similar, I think we've still got the edge. And once we release that French algorithm, there is potential for revenue on that single language, especially in Mauritius, Reunion, and France. And we're going to tack that in as soon as possible. Our goal is to give TMN a use case as soon as possible. And that's really our biggest focus. But those two things I'm really excited about, because the validation has been a challenge for us, and we're solving that, which is we're using a voting system to validate suggestions, and those suggestions go into almost like a round that is voted on, and the highest votes gives us the suggestion that we should use, as opposed to 10 other suggestions that weren't quite the right answer. And that's going to make a big difference to the data that we're currently collecting. We're learning every day, and we're pushing hard, that's for sure.
Ryan, I could keep talking to you for another hour, but unfortunately we're limited in time. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to not only talk about TranslateMe with you, but to finally catch up with you, a member of the ecosystem who's been here for so long. And I can't believe that it took us this long to finally connect.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate it. Like I said before, I'm sure maybe when we hit some of our next major milestones, we can do a catch up thereafter. I can show you something where we can maybe share on screen. But yeah, again, shout out to you and your team and everyone that is supporting really a speculative project right now. But this type of thing that we're doing is what we should be doing more of. So whenever you want to chat, you just let me know. Okay.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to having you on the next episode.
Excellent. Thanks for the time. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, what did you think of that conversation? I personally had been wanting to chat with Ryan about TranslateMe for quite some time. The project is an OG in the Neo ecosystem and has continued to push forward through the bear market and pandemic despite not raising funds from a public token sale. It was also great just to chat with someone who has been in the ecosystem since the days of AntShares. We at Neo News Today will certainly be keeping our ears to the ground for future TranslateMe updates. To keep up to date with the latest in the Neo ecosystem, visit www.neonewstoday.com. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Apple iTunes, and or Spotify. And leave a 5-star review if you feel that others should hear our content. Every subscription and review helps others learn more about the NNT pod and the Neo ecosystem. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Neo News Today podcast, and we look forward to catching you next time.